Fusion Mobile, quality e-learning experience on the go.
Basic concepts in government is the next topic in our study. We will look into the first concept, which is the concept of the state. A state may be defined as a politically organized body of people inhabiting a defined geographical entity with an organized legitimate government. The state in this respect is entirely free from control from the outside or from external. In defining a state, we have four major concepts that must be seen for the state to be defined correctly. And these words are as follows. We have what we call territory, we have government, we have population, and we have sovereignty. For you to define a state, you must make sure that these four words are inclusive for you to get a correct definition of the concept that is the state. Examples of states includes Ghana, Nigeria, USA, Canada, etc. Remember that the state came into existence as a result of people living together to seek a solution to their problem of insecurity. In what we'll call the theories on the origin of the state, we have what we call the social contract theory, which stipulates that man lived in a state of nature where hardship was the order of the day. The brutish and the nasty life in this state of nature was so enormous that man could not bear it again. In the desire of man to be free from this state of insecurity, men came together and collectively accepted to surrender their rights and their privileges to one person whom they called the Levitian, who would rule over them and govern them in a bid to save them from this bad situation that was found in this state of nature. Having said that, we will now go to the features of a state. The first feature that we have is what we call permanence. The state remains a permanent feature. Government can change many times, but a state remains permanent. Government comes and goes, but the state is fixed. So permanence is the first feature of a state. Secondly, we have territory. A state has a defined territory with a limit to its size. It must have clearly defined boundaries which separate it from others. Things like mountains, waters, forests, etc. they make up a state. So for you to call any place a state, it must have a defined territory. It must have a geographical location which is defined with clearly defined boundaries, making it separate from one and making it separate from the another for it to be called a state. The third feature of a state is population. For a place to be called a state, there must be a given number of people which makes up that entity. So a state cannot be without population. People or citizens are what makes up a state. So any place that has no people, that has no citizens in it, is not worthy to be called a state. We have the next point as government. Government is the machinery set up by the state to pilot the affairs of the people which make up the state. The sustenance and prestige of a state are maintained by the government. So for any entity to be called a state, it must have a government who rules and oversees to the affairs of piloting the state to ensure a smooth running of government, so that the state will be able to achieve its aims and objectives. Every state that doesn't have a government is not worthy to be called a state. This government is comprised of individuals whom the people, either by election or by nomination, chooses to represent them in government, so as to be able to stand for them and also extend to them dividends of governance. The last feature of a state is the one we call sovereignty. Sovereignty means the supreme power to make decisions and enforce same on the people in your state. The sovereignty of a state is non-negotiable and must be free from external control, which means that the state must have the power vested to it to be able to make laws and to make policies that will govern its people. And in the discharge of these laws and policies, the state on its own has the power to resist any form of external oppression or interference, so as to enable it to govern its citizenry in the best way, that the welfare of the people will be actualized, so that the state will be a one that has the people at heart and that protects the people. We'll have the next as the relationship between the state and the government. Is there any link between the state and the government? Is the government separate from the state? Or can the state do without the government? Or can the government do without the state? In this, we would know as we look into the relationship between the state and the government. The state and government are inseparable in the scheme of things. Government is a feature of a state. No state exists without a government. Otherwise, anarchy will reign. The people making up the state has a government to administer the area, and this involves the three organs of government put in place: the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary must be put in place to enable a government administer its areas, because the legislature makes the law, which the executive enforces, which the judiciary interprets and makes known to the people. So for a government to exist and for a state to exist, these three organs must be in play. Remember that government and states cannot be separated, because no one can exist without the other. Likewise, no state exists without a government. Also, no government exists without a state. These organs of government have distinct functions to perform in the affairs of the state. The state is therefore a corporate entity, while the government is an institution set up by the state. Government can change from time to time, but the state remains a permanent feature. More so, the sovereignty of the state rests in the government, who exercises it in trust for the state. Having known this, we have come to the conclusion of the first concept in government, which is the concept of the state. We have seen its meaning, we have seen the features, we have also seen the relationship between the state and the government. So having seen this and having known this, we will go into the next concept of government, which is the concept of the nation.